It's my honor to welcome Dr. Ron Paul to Liberty University.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. It's a delight to be here. It is a real pleasure to visit with so many young people because the campaign in this past year has been energized by the young people who have a great deal of concern for the future of the country. And for that purpose, I welcome all the young people here. I'm delighted that you have an interest in not only this campaign, but how we're going to save this country and preserve liberty in this world today. Yes, I was raised in Pittsburgh. My family was a Christian family. I was raised in a Christian home, and there were two things that were taught: Christian values and the work ethic. And during that time, at the age of 14, I committed to Christ as my Savior. During my medical school training, the issue of abortion never came up because in the late 1950s and the early 60s, it was not yet an issue. So it was rather strange to see what happened in the decade of the 60s, where the moral conditions of this country deteriorated and abortion became acceptable. There was a time when in my medical training as an OB doctor at the University of Pittsburgh that I accidentally walked into a room where they were performing an abortion on a baby that weighed several pounds and was taken out and left to die. It was a heart-wrenching experience for me, and I knew this was a very, very important issue that we would have to deal with. I am the champion of the Constitution and personal liberty and free markets and sound money, but all that is irrelevant if you don't understand the importance of life, and that means all life, preborn life as well. I have a bill in the Congress. It's called the Sanctity of Life Resolution, and it's a program for my way of stopping abortions. But in the beginning of it, I state that life begins at conception. And some people argue with me on that, and yet it's not a political statement. Matter of fact, to me, it's not even a religious statement. The fact that life begins at conception is a scientific statement. That is when life begins. But my approach to many of the social issues as well as abortion is to try to solve our problems through the use of the Constitution, obey the law. So the Sanctity of Life Amendment addresses this problem by taking away the jurisdiction from the federal courts. This can be done by a majority vote of the Congress and a signature by the President. So if we had done this 5 or 10 years ago, when we had more control of the House and the Senate and the presidency, we could have stopped literally millions of abortions. There's nothing wrong with trying to change our courts, which we will and have to someday, but that's a long-term problem. Amending the Constitution is a worthy project. But the fact that we can remove jurisdiction, whether it has to do with public prayer or whether it has to do with saying our Pledge of Allegiance and public expression of God in public places, if we could pass state laws that would stand the scrutiny and yet never be reversed by our federal courts, we could accomplish so much sooner, and that vehicle is available to us. One of the reasons I think the young people have flocked to our campaign is we do talk about financial conditions of this country and what you as a next generation are inheriting. You're inheriting a big problem. It's a financial problem, and we've gotten ourselves into this mess because we've done but one thing. We haven't followed the law. We haven't followed the Constitution, and if we had, we wouldn't have so many problems today. We now have a financial burden that is astronomical, and that burden is being passed on to the next generation. We now owe $2.7 trillion to foreigners. And this move in the direction of accumulating more debt is unsustainable. Our national debt is now $9 trillion. The budget proposed this year is going to raise the national debt. It's already admitted that it could be $600 billion, and it'll probably be more because we're moving into a recession. The point being is that you, as a young generation, are inheriting a problem that will take some hard work to deal with. And that means that we have to look to what it's like to have a free market economy and sound money. Because if we had that, we wouldn't have these conditions that we have today. We overspend for political reasons. It's very easy for the politicians to accommodate any request or any demand, and whether it has a conservative image to it or a liberal image to it, there's usually a compromise in Washington. They usually come together and say, well, let's raise both. Instead of cutting both, they raise both, and they just pass on the debt to the next generation. What we do is we tax, and we tax too much, and then we borrow too much, and then there's still not enough money, so they go to the Federal Reserve and they allow the Federal Reserve to print the money. If we have true reform to restore soundness to our economy and soundness to our Constitution, we must address the subject of sound money. The founders of this country knew about sound money and understood it. They understood what the Bible said about sound money and honest weights and measures. This is why they said that you could not print money and you could only have gold and silver as legal tender. So eventually, when your generation has the responsibility of resolving this problem and resort to the Constitution, we will not have a central bank, a Federal Reserve system that's allowed to debase our currency at will. And then again, if we had a proper-sized government and we followed Article 1, Section 8, and the government was very limited, you know, we wouldn't need very much taxes either. At least at the federal level, there would be very minimal taxes. Which means then that we could give serious consideration, and we must someday repeal the 16th Amendment and not even have an income tax. The income tax acknowledges that the federal government owns us. They own all our income and permits us to keep a certain percentage. And it is for this reason that governments feel like they can tell us what to do and how to spend our money and give us our money back only under certain conditions. And this is why I think it's so important to have minimal government so that we have the incentives to work hard, take care of our families, and keep the fruits of our labor. This is the system that is the only humanitarian system that will take care of the maximum number of people and have the best equitable distribution of wealth. That is free markets and sound money and personal liberty. When we resort to welfarism and socialism and all these other government interventions, we end up with diminishing productivity, diminishing the wealth of the country, and actually depending on the government for all our resources. But the whole problem is government produces nothing. All they can do is take from one group and give to another. And we've been getting away with this for a long time. We've been getting away with this for quite a few decades. But now we've run out of wealth, the currency's under attack, and our productivity is going down. We have been able to print money because we've had the reserve currency of the world, and we've been able to export our money and buy goods and services. So what happened? Our good jobs went overseas. So now we're less productive than ever before. And what we need to do is restore confidence in ourselves that freedom works. Freedom not only is popular, it really works if we allow it to.